Pop Culture Pastor.
So, Cody, the Oscars were this past weekend. I'd like to make sure everyone knows Cody did not kiss Halle Berry.
I did not.
But Adrian Brody did again.
Well, it was more like Halle kissed him.
That's true.
So,
Yeah.
payback.
Did you watch the Oscars?
No. My wife didn't, which is weird because she usually is watching the Oscars.
No.
In the award show, she's like, sign me up. The Grammys, the Oscars.
Why did she? Now I'm very curious. Why did she not watch?
She wasn't invested too heavily in the big movies that had a lot of nominations, besides Wicked.
But this was a bad year for movies, wasn't it?
It was an interesting year for movies where I think a few definitely stood out, but like it wasn't solid all the way through. Like the year Oppenheimer won, there was at least 4 or 5 movies that I would have been like, well, if this wins, I won't be too upset. But this year, it seemed like indie art house movies.
Yeah.
They're back, baby.
All right. Yeah, I'll take your word for it. What is an indie art house movie? Would that be Captain America, Brave New World?
I think it fits close to that category. Marty Scorsese would say it's cinema.
Yeah. Marty Scorsese. That is slander, sir. Or libel. I get those confused. I don't think Marty would say that.
Probably not.
Although Marty, we have fun with Marty, but I think he kind of backed off his Marvel slander.
If he wants all the quality actors, I think that he's going to have to limit the Marvel slander.
Yeah. Well, hey, this is Pop Culture Pastor, the podcast, sporting a new podcast cover. I don't know if anyone noticed that or not.
I did.
You noticed. Good. Yeah, my name's Dave. Cody's here.
I am.
And we've also got a special guest. Andrew Haworth is here. Andrew is I know you already told me this, a psychologist?
I am a psychologist.
Okay.
I've been a psychologist for 10 years now.
A psychologist by trade.
Yes.
Is this like the most important person we've ever had on the show?
He's up there.
Oh, I hope not.
So Andrew is here to help us out and work with our main subject, especially. We're gonna get deep today, Cody.
We are.
You got to stop messing around and telling jokes. We're being serious.
I will try my best. I'm just a simple LMSW, so Andrew will be our expert for sure.
I wonder if people listen to this think, what are these dudes really pastors? Especially Dave. He doesn't seem to take anything seriously. I know it drives my fellow clergy nuts, I think.
Jesus definitely had a sense of humor.
He did. I think so too. In fact, I was just reading something in the Bible today. We'll talk about that off. Nobody wants to hear that on the pod.
Just know there's some humor in the New Testament. So,
okay, so the Oscars happened. Zoe Saldana won for Best Supporting Actress. That was a big moment for her work in Amelia Perez.
Which, out of all the movies she has been in, that's like very random.
Yeah. Yeah, well, right. If she's, according to like the money made in the movies she's been in, she's one of like the biggest movie stars on the planet.
Thank you, Avatar and Marvel.
Yeah, for sure. Now, do either of you know any of the controversy surrounding Amelia Perez? I'm aware there's controversy. I had no idea what it was.
So some of it is that the way Mexico is being presented.
Okay.
And also that some of the actresses or actors aren't from Mexico or of Mexican heritage.
Oh, and they're playing Mexicans.
Which Zoe is, I believe, Dominican Republic.
Yes. So her grandmother came to the country in 1961.
And so that's a little bit of it. And then the lead thespian being a transgendered individual. a trans woman, that there was some controversy there. And then like people have dug up some of her past tweets and there was more controversy there. And so it kind of was a sinking ship going into the Oscars.
Interesting. I'm always fascinated when they dig into like the old tweets. And Andrew, hold on to this because this will play into what we want to talk about later with the idea of a culture that doesn't seem to want to forgive. They don't seem to want to forgive. And yet our stories are going a different direction, but we'll get there. Wicked, they opened the Oscars with an 8-minute musical medley by Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. And Wicked had its moment in the sun, but it didn't win too much, did it?
No. My wife watched that musical medley on repeat, thanks to TikTok and YouTube and Reels and all that jazz.
Yeah, I saw her post on Facebook. She apparently was very moved.
Tears.
Yeah.
Tears.
Kieran Culkin.
My favorite Culkin.
Yeah. The one he's Fuller from Home Alone.
Yes.
Won an Oscar.
I hope he didn't drink too much Pepsi.
And talked about having lots of kids, which good for him.
Yes.
That's a very un-Hollywood thing to talk about having a lot of kids is a good thing. And he was just up there just being really open, saying, like, my wife said we could have more kids if I won an Oscar. So, all right.
Bravo.
Good for you. I was happy for Kieran Culkin. So was Macaulay Culkin. I read a little article today.
He had tears.
Yeah, that he was very happy for his brother. And I thought that was sweet. Because Macaulay is,
he's retired.
Yeah, he's not really in that area anymore. But, so was there anything else that went on? Was there any controversy? I like it when someone slaps somebody, gives me something to talk about, something to think about. Oh, I guess there were people omitted from the honoring the dead actors.
In memoriam section, there always is.
That's a better way to put it. Probably a little bit.
That's how they word it. They always omit people. And I don't know if it's deliberate or if there's just so many people that have been in film and behind the scenes, writing, directing, making musical scores that it's just too much to keep track of. But some somewhat big names got left off the list.
Yeah. Adrian Brody won again, Best Actor. Famously kissed Halle Trump. I don't know where I was going with that. Halle Berry. I must have him on the brain or something.
Yeah, it's weird that it's like 20 years apart that he's won these Oscars, and the films that he made in between, like, not all of them were Oscar worthy. Some of them I felt were definitely a cash grab, and then some of them were like, oh, Wes Anderson needs someone.
Some of them were high art, like Predators.
The key is it has to end with ST, right? Because you have the pianist and then the brutalist. And
yes.
He wins for those.
Yeah.
So in 20 years, we can expect another one.
It wasn't he like the same kind of nationality in those movies? Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was
German?
German Jewish.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting stuff. I like Adrian Brody.
He's interesting.
It's funny to me how times change because I'm old enough to remember when he did just plant one on Halle Berry, but he actually gets a lot of social media ire from that. Yeah. Anger from people being like, how dare he? And then that was what made Halle Berry so hilarious is she just came and planted one on him in front of his wife.
She apologized.
Oh, so she has to apologize, but Adrian Brody doesn't.
I hope he did.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So Marvel had an interesting week. The MCU, you're aware of them? The best comic book entertainment group on the planet?
That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's right, Cody. I'm pretty sure that is correct. Although I haven't watched Daredevil Born Again yet.
Me either.
Yeah, I'm hoping to watch the first couple episodes.
What about you, Andrew?
I hear good things, but I haven't seen it myself.
Did you watch the old Netflix shows?
No, my Daredevil is Ben Affleck. Unfortunately, I'm having a hard time trying to scrub that from my brain.
I don't even know what you're talking about. I think I got Eternal Sunshine of the
Repression
Spotlight in
is
mind.
a real thing.
I got Eternal Sunshine. That particular Daredevil out of my brain.
Which we do need to do a Be Kind rewind on that someday.
Oh, man, we probably should soon. With the series out, we need some Ben Affleck Daredevil to talk about probably. Maybe.
No, I was talking Eternal Sunshine, not the Ben Affleck Daredevil.
Why would we do that?
Because Jim Carrey was great in it and Mark Ruffalo's in it.
So sad. I don't want to watch a sad movie. Anyways, Marvel had an interesting week because, they're coming off like the Captain America movie is in the process of underperforming, which, I mean, not compared to what I think it's not taking anyone by surprise. I know it's been number 1 3 weeks in a row, but it was always going to be because there's nothing else out right now.
It almost cost us a trivia question.
Side note, Cody and I got picked up on a trivia team here in our town.
Yes.
And I bet I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, man, with you guys on it, that must have been a pretty good trivia team. Well, yes, it was. And we dominated.
Name it and claim it, baby.
How many teams were there?
17.
17 teams of 6 people each, mostly. And we were dominating. And in the last round, so they have all of these like special things because it's a fundraiser that your team can buy. And one of them they were called screws. And there was like a picture of a screw. And that when someone played that on you, you got no points for the question, even if you answered it right.
That happened.
One of the other things was they could steal some of our team members. And you'd have to go sit at their table and answer questions for them for 4 questions. The last round, we have moments where there's like 2 people at our table.
Yep.
I played more questions for the other teams than our team.
Thankfully, I only got stolen once. But yes, it was just me and another person, and we were carrying the whole team.
Yeah, it was weird. It was one of those moments where my reputation went out in front of me, because if they were smart, they would have grabbed Cody. Because what I did not know, and what everybody listening to this podcast needs to know, is that Cody is a 1990s country and western expert. This dude, there is not one Alan Jackson song he couldn't tell you the name of. Apparently.
That's a fun fact. I didn't know that about you.
Unbelievable.
I forgot it about me until this trivia night came out.
Oh, man. So how many questions do you think were music questions?
I would say
there were 48 total questions, right?
Probably 15 to 20.
So yeah, like a third.
Yeah.
So you got like a third of the questions are music questions, and I'm betting at least half of those music questions were country songs.
Oh yeah,
brutal, just brutal. Gosh, I hate living in Kansas sometimes. The whole time we're sitting there and another country song would play, and I just want to stand up and yell like, Tribe Called Quest exists. Okay, we can play a rap song.
I was just waiting for them to play Beck. That was what I was there for.
I'm convinced they don't know who Beck is. They were like, who's that? Is he in country or western?
So what was the grand prize? Did you get like a trophy, an award?
I never got to that.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so we should have got trophies, right? See, here's what happened. The final question comes along. We're in the lead comfortably, but we bet it all because we're not pansies.
They did it Final Jeopardy style.
Oh, yeah, nice.
We bet it all.
High stakes.
And the question is, this actor has a #1 movie at the box office in 6 consecutive decades. So
they list off 8 actors, by the way.
I am pretty sure it's Sylvester Stallone. Because I'm like, oh man, Stallone was huge. Yeah. The only time it gets kind of iffy is maybe in like the 90s, late 90s, but in the early 90s he has like Demolition Man and some other things, and I'm like, man, it's got to be Sylvester Stallone. But then the other part of the team is saying Harrison Ford.
Me.
Well, listen, and we're at the table, we're in shambles because we start adding them up. We're like, okay, this has 2 correct answers. We're like, Harrison Ford definitely qualifies. So we end up guessing Harrison Ford. Well, the quizmaster says that the correct answer is Sylvester Stallone and awards first place to this other team. They get the trophies
And the prize money.
before, like, they would acknowledge, like, we show them, like, okay, here's the deal. Here's what happened. Up until 3 weeks ago, Sylvester Stallone was the only correct answer. But 3 weeks ago, when Captain America Brave New World hit number 1 with Harrison Ford, he became the second correct answer. And the quizmaster had no idea.
He made the question 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's got to be kind of an awkward situation. You're at this charity event and you're like, hey, technically we're winners too.
He literally took cash out of his own pocket to reimburse our team's entry fee.
Okay.
But we didn't get trophies. We did get recognized, right? Were we in the paper?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know who gets the paper.
Someone.
Go ask some old person if we were in the paper. Do you remember seeing me? Maybe winning something? What was our team name?
You're a quizzard, Harry.
Yeah, anyways, so we're basically trivia. Why did we start talking about that?
Because Harrison Ford and Captain America Brave New World.
Oh, yeah, it's not
Marvel.
It got number 1, but it's not going to make enough money to make its money back. If it does, Marvel's lying about how much it cost. They said it cost them 180 million. There's no way. But I don't know if it's even made that. Anyways, it was a weird week for the MCU because you got all that going on with Captain America going down like 70% each week. And then somewhere a few days back, or last weekend, in the middle of last week, it was like a Saturday, these concept art pictures start dropping on the internet. Apparently, an artist who used to work with Marvel doing concept art, all these things dropped, and it was clearly like Secret Wars Doomsday stuff. And
Allegedly.
No. I mean, okay, the art reflected the stories from the comics. Mm-hmm. So it's confirmed that this person did work with Marvel doing concept art. So this was real concept art, and it looked like Secret Wars stuff. What's unknown is whether this is the direction they're going or not, blah, blah, blah. But first of all, number 1, it looked awesome. Secondly, I wanted to sever my mind, like Severance, to immediately forget what I saw. Because there was some cool things in there, man. There were some cool stuff.
I like to think Marvel paid this guy to drop all these photos to get people completely off the trail of what they're doing.
Yeah, that's super conspiratorial.
It
Golly. Kevin Feige's like working with Elon Musk in your mind, doing all the conspiracies. So anyways, there was a lot of Doctor Doom, Fantastic Four, Doctor Strange. It was like some of it was in like the medieval kind of genre. Like it looked like they were back in time, which is kind of a Secret Wars thing. But so that shouldn't be a big spoiler. If people that are aware of the story. But yeah, it looked very cool. And also Marvel had an interesting week because all that was out there, and they've kept it pretty tight. And Daredevil Born Again came out to mostly good reviews.
I did see critics were more harsh on it than fans.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. The first set of reviews that came out for Daredevil were all pretty high. But those were like the people they choose to give the screeners out to, right? The first few episodes. Then when the real critics, who they gave the whole first season to, once their reviews started coming out, they were a little bit lower, like, I would say like 70-75% type stuff, that range. There were people that were kind of saying it was muddled, which this story was rewritten completely, and they kept some stuff. And so, but I've heard good things from people that have watched the first 2 episodes.
I'm hopeful.
Me too. Andrews, we've already established, has not watched those.
I have not.
Still reeling from the trauma that was Ben Affleck.
This is I saved this for last because it's my favorite bit of news. Andrew, have you seen the 1989 dark comedy The Burbs?
I have not.
Okay, you can leave now.
I'll see myself. It was great being here. Thank you, guys.
Tom Hanks, Bruce Dern in that movie. Is directed by Joe Dante. Carrie Fisher's in that movie.
We're leaving out everyone's favorite Goonie.
Corey Feldman is in that movie. Corey Feldman's great. I think it might be his best movie. Maybe License to Drive. That was pretty good. Heather Graham, the other Corey, the Coreys.
Stand By Me?
Nah. He was all right in that. That was more River Phoenix's movie, if we're being honest.
Okay.
Yeah, River was the guy back then. But yeah, so The Burbs is a dark comedy about a cul-de-sac in the suburbs where ill things are afoot. And everyone in the neighborhood has like this suspicion about this one family in the neighborhood who are kind of weird. The Klopeks. And it's one of my favorite movies ever. I loved watching this movie when I played hooky from school when I was a kid.
Kids don't play hooky.
It's one of my favorite Tom Hanks movies, and it just kills me that Tom Hanks isn't a fan of it.
It's because he knows Money Pit is where it's at.
Money Pit is god-awful.
Whoa!
I'll say it again.
They're in the same vein, really?
No, The Burbs is so much better. So much more fun. Anyways, here's the news. Peacock TV has ordered to series a reboot series of The Burbs.
Not starring Tom Hanks.
Not starring Tom Hanks, but we're getting Haley Joel Osment.
Hey!
Who was in Forrest Gump with Tom Hanks.
He's still with us.
Why wouldn't he be? He's like 30.
He's older than 30, I think.
Well, let's just look this up.
I feel he's around my age.
How wrong?
I'm older than 30 now.
How wrong is Cody? Let's play a little game. Oh, he's 36.
Hey, he is my age. I'll be 36 soon.
Anyways, it's starring Keke Palmer, which that's interesting. Please tell me Haley Joel Osment is playing the Rick Dukeman character, Art.
I could see that.
Oh, he'd be great as Art. That would be fantastic. But yeah, it's going to be a series on the Peacock. The Burbs follows a young couple played by Keke Palmer and Jack Whitehall. I don't know him. Who have reluctantly relocated to the husband's childhood home. Their world is upended when a new neighbor moves in across the street, bringing old secrets of the cul-de-sac to light, and new deadly threats shatter the illusion of their quiet little neighborhood. Please tell me the old neighbor is Bruce Dern. Please tell me it has some link to the old hood. That would be amazing. Maybe it's Corey Feldman.
Maybe.
Oh, that would be genius. What if it's Corey Feldman, Cody?
Corey needs work.
You're not nearly as excited about this as I am.
I told you Money Pit is where it was at.
All right. No one likes Money Pit except for Diane Lane from Cheers.
Well,
I don't even remember her real name. Shelley something. Who was the lady from Cheers that was in the Money Pit?
That's a you thing. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'm too old. I'm Gen X, and my memory doesn't work that well anymore. I know Shelley Long.
Yes.
I knew if I babbled long enough, it'd come to me. Okay, we're gonna go play the movie game. Hey, Andrew's been waiting patiently. We'll be right back.
This is Pop Culture Pastor.
All right, welcome back. Cody is here, and he is preparing mentally to play Andrew Haworth, our guest in the movie game.
I am prepared to lose.
It's been a while. Andrew probably is the smartest guy we've ever had on the show.
I don't know why you keep saying that. That's not true.
I'm just trying to put pressure on Andrew.
Building you up.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the positivity. It's really uplifting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't fall for imposter syndrome. You gotta believe that this is where you belong.
Man, we're already using technical terms and everything.
I'm just trying to help Andrew here.
Yeah.
While you're tearing him down.
If you're playing along at home, you know the name of the game. Here's what's going to happen. I am holding in my hand 3 Rotten Tomato movie profiles. A mediocre movie, a certified rotten movie, and a certified fresh movie. And since Andrew is our guest, he gets to pick. Which one would you like to solve? The rotten movie, the mediocre movie, or the fresh movie?
I'll choose the fresh, please.
Okay, that's a safe guess. All right, this movie, the first level, you're gonna get the critic score, Rotten Tomato score, and the year it came out.
Okay.
85% certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes in the year 2003. 2003. I can almost hear Cody wanting to guess Pirates of the Caribbean 2.
You are correct.
It is not. It is not that. We'll give Andrew that one for free.
I cannot guess on yours, so don't worry.
I'm not ready to guess yet. I'm sorry.
Level 2, you'll get the second build actor. So for this 85% certified fresh movie from 2003, the second build actor is James Caan. James Caan. Big name.
Oh.
Big name. That's not always the case with the second
Elf?
build actor. It is Elf!
I was going to say, Elf's the only one I can think James Caan would be playing second fiddle.
Yeah, exactly.
Andrew nails it.
Oh, this is the end for me.
Cody facing an uphill climb. Will it be the mediocre movie or the horrible movie?
We will go mediocre.
Okay, we'll put the bad one away in case we need a tiebreaker.
We're not going to need it.
Cody's got some work to do. This is a mediocre movie, rated 56% from the year 2017.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's relatively recent.
Suicide Squad.
It is not the Suicide Squad. Good guess. I think that's pretty close to the tomato meter it hit. 56%, 2017. The second build actor is Zac Efron.
I don't know.
Zac Efron.
I
From 2017.
Baywatch.
Baywatch? Baywatch couldn't sniff 56%. Are you kidding me? Okay, Andrew's the winner, but we're going to keep going to see how long it takes. Cody.
Is it Bad Grandpa?
That was going to be my
Also,
second
no way
guess.
that hit 56%. The audience score, this might help you, 86%. The audiences loved it.
Is it the movie he did with that guy from Top Gun Maverick?
What in the world?
Nope.
That guy from Top Gun Maverick? There's like 8 guys from Top Gun Maverick.
The one that was Goose's son.
Miles Teller?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
I don't even know what movie that is.
It's a movie.
The first build actor, Hugh Jackman. Are you serious right now?
I'm blanking.
My daughters would be punching you.
Well, that's
Is it
okay.
one of the High School Musicals? I don't know.
No. Zac Efron, Hugh Jackman, nothing?
No, you're missing me.
All right,
I know it.
Here's the blurb.
Oh, let's listen to the blurb and then let him guess.
Okay.
P.T. Barnum leads a unique and extraordinary life that culminates in his creation of a circus that bears his name.
I actually didn't watch this movie.
What?
Yeah, The Greatest Showman was not on my radar, and I feel I probably would have been overly critical, so
Your loss. Hugh Jackman's delightful.
probably.
Zac Efron wasn't bad. He had his old chin in it.
Now I want to know what Baywatch did score. Because
Baywatch? Well, we'll just look this
I
up.
feel-
There's no way. There's no way that was even close. to
critics
where you're at it.
probably loved it.
What was it was like 55%?
56.
Okay. The audience score is 56%.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. The critic score is 18.
We were close.
Clearly, audiences just love The Rock. About 56%, because it seems like The Rock, that's all he gets. Black Adam, 56%. Jumanji, 56%.
Jumanji 2.
56%.
Moana.
It's like clockwork. Moana 2.
56%.
Moana was kind of universally adored. All right, that is the movie game. When we come back, we are going to get serious.
We will.
Yeah. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Pop Culture Pastor. It's time for our main discussion. This is why we brought Andrew on, not just to beat Cody at the movie game.
Which was a bonus.
Because Andrew is a real, honest-to-goodness
Psychologist.
Psychologist. Now, what's the difference between like a psychotherapist or what's a psychiatrist?
Yeah,
there's a big
psychiatrist.
difference
There
between
is, yeah.
psychiatrists and psychologists.
Okay, tell me, because I don't know.
We'll
Yeah.
let Andrew do that one.
Sure. So a psychiatrist can prescribe medication, and a psychologist is going to use talk therapy primarily for treatment.
Oh, okay.
purposes.
So, then they're doctors then?
You
Or-
can be a doctor in psychology and psychiatry, but psychiatry is going to prescribe medication, and a psychologist
That's really the only
can't
difference.
do that. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the primary difference.
Oh, okay. Now I know. I had no
Yes. And then there's a bunch of other schools or modalities for therapists besides psychologists, but Andrew's in the chief.
I am nodding my head.
A therapist is an umbrella term to include social workers, psychologists, psychotherapists, counselors. It's kind of a
Catch-all.
yeah.
Pastors. No.
Sometimes.
We are not
yeah.
therapists. We should.
Well, I mean, I am, but
You have the
Cody
training.
went to actual school. I was trying to make a blanket statement for pastors who do a bit of counseling,
yes.
but in a
there's
certain kind of way.
definitely Christian counselors, but
Spiritual
that
counseling.
looks kind of different.
Yeah. Oh. Sound like there was a little shade there, Cody. Do you want to talk about that?
No, not particularly
Okay.
on this episode.
All right. But so Andrew's here. He's a guy that we wanted to have on the show. And when you have a guy like Andrew on the show, we don't waste it. So none of this funny business, Cody. We're going to talk
I'm
about some of the
reeling
stuff
it
I
in.
want to talk about. The serious stuff.
I don't mind the funny stuff too, guys. I'm appreciating it.
Yeah.
Winning.
Okay. So I sent you guys some articles, and the first article appeared in Vox.com, which I don't even know what that is, but it appeared May 22nd, 2022. And essentially, the headline here says, "Everyone wants forgiveness, but no one is being forgiven." And I kind of want to talk about this idea that we would call in the ministry world, we would call grace. Forgiveness is a good term for it, but we seem to live in a culture. Well, let me just read you a couple parts of this article. I want to paint a picture of our society. And then once we're done with that, I kind of want to move into pop culture because pop culture seems to be going in a different direction. Here's a quote from this article. "If we applied a positive roadmap to a typical outrage cycle, what we would hope to find after that initial period of outrage is discussion, apology, atonement, and forgiveness. That process almost never happens on the modern public stage. Instead, far too often, a single offense becomes part of a litany of wrongs that follow the offender around the public sphere, with the long tail of their sins, imagined, real, or alleged, trailing behind them forever, ready to be brought up the next time they draw attention, leading them to endure still more damnation every time they make new mistakes." So I'll stop right there. By the way, I should say the writer of this is Asia Romano from Vox.com. And so that paints a pretty bleak picture of our culture, our society. And I kind of want to ask you, what do you think this is driven by? Like, something has changed from when we were young, when we were kids. I think we can tell out in the world. Do you have any thoughts on the culprit or the culprits, as it were? Why are we less likely to forgive now in our culture?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's probably multifaceted, right? There's a lot of different factors that you have to consider when we're talking about the change in a systemic change in a culture. We just look at individualism within the United States in itself. We focus a lot on individual goals, individual merits, and it sort of feeds into this idea that it's because of what I did or what I've done versus the other group. It creates like an in-group versus out-group sort of dynamic where we think that we're the most important and we have the we're right and they're wrong, so to speak. It creates division.
Yeah, that's good. So that's very interesting. There's definitely this. You saying that reminds me of something that I notice a lot, which is we seem to be battling with self-righteousness quite a bit. And what I mean by that is not like your standard kind of run-of-the-mill self-righteousness, which our brains kind of trick us into doing anyways. Like, our brains constantly trying to trick us into doing what we already want to do, like justifying. But it seems like the self-righteousness that's kind of rampant out there is this idea of, I am going to speak on something that I am not qualified to speak on. And I'm going to tell people that are qualified to speak on it that they're clearly wrong. That sort. Do you see that out in the world? And how does that affect what's going on?
You're talking about people who aren't necessarily experts,
yes,
having an opinion on things. And
yeah, so social media has kind of fostered this very large space in our culture now where we speak out on all the things and we're experts. And social media in particular, people can get hundreds of thousands of followers now, and it's like they become the experts even though they're not.
Yeah, and people don't exactly check their sources either. So it's like you don't even know what is real or what is accurate information anymore. So that does definitely contribute to the division. There isn't a lot of accountability and ownership of different thoughts, especially the things that you'll see on social media.
Yeah. Cody, what do you think about this? Like, how do we get here? How do we get to this place where we're so angry?
So I definitely feel that part of it is definitely what Andrew highlighted, that individual, that individuality that creates an us versus them dichotomy. But when you have social media, it's there all the time, and where like you're talking with your friends will check you on it, and you'll get reeled in, or you just won't have those friends anymore. Where with social media, you don't even know these people, and whatever issue you're going to speak about, there's going to be a number of people that will agree wholeheartedly with you, and a strong number that won't, and a bunch of people in between. And so it's real easy for us to double down on our wrong opinions when it's someone we don't know. Like, I don't want to hurt my loved ones by saying this, but someone I don't know, go kick rocks. I don't care.
Yeah.
And so there's a lack of accountability there. And then with, like you were talking about before, I think it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, that like someone gets a little bit of information, they think that they are then an expert and can talk on it at length, even though there's a bunch of gaps in their information, and they're not willing to accept the feedback of like, oh, you're kind of on the right path, but you might want to include this and this. Nope, I'm right. You don't know anything. Eat fish.
Yeah, and to compound that point, Cody's suggesting here is we tend to find other people that are going to share and validate our beliefs, and with the internet and the amount of connections we can form, we're going to find people that it becomes an echo chamber.
Yes.
Right? We start to just hear what we want to hear as opposed to maybe what we need to hear.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that, because as someone who considers themselves very neutral in the political world, I tend to look at social media that way. So for me, I was on all the social medias. I have to be for the podcast, but I have individual accounts on most of them as well. And Facebook was clearly, 5-10 years ago, the conservative echo chamber. Some people might still think it is. I don't know. I don't. That stuff doesn't generally come across my newsfeed because I'm not interested in it. And Facebook knows me, right? Apparently, I want Temu ads. That's what I want. And then Twitter, back then, still Twitter was very much, as a neutral observer, a liberal echo chamber.
Right.
Now, mind you, the people inside the chamber would argue vehemently, oh, no, this is just real information, Dave. Like, no, it's not. Enter Elon Musk, who takes over Twitter, renames it X. Now I'm not really sure what it is other than, trash dump. Like, there's a lot of just stuff like bots and things trying to sell things and fake accounts, and it's just kind of a mess, really. I still see conservative and liberal, ridiculous takes. As a neutral observer, I think I could say that. I'd be like, y'all are both seem way off the wagon to me. But it's interesting. And then all the liberal people went over to Blue Sky, and then the echo chamber resumed there.
Right.
And it's very interesting to me that's what we kind of want. We want to be around people that are going to validate our opinions. And then, like you said a few minutes ago, we're not digging for information. We're finding the first thing that validates the information, and we're propping that information up. That's the social media part. We're like, oh, I'm going to like and share this. Meanwhile, the people that have really figured out the algorithm, they've really mastered that, have built these huge platforms based on getting all these followers, and they become real sources of information to people, whether it's real or not, whether it's true or not. But almost always they built this followership, they built this platform on anger, which is super fascinating to me and also kind of scary. Now, this Vox article goes on, because I don't want to spend a lot of time here, because this is a show about pop culture. The writer goes into kind of a pop culture area, and she starts talking about cancel culture, and she references not just the cancel culture for like when someone really did something and they get canceled, but even like something that may or may not exist, something that was just kind of, I don't mean this pun like you think it, but trumped up, right? Most of the time Trump deserves, because he said something real. And so people get angry. But she starts talking about this, and then she says, sometimes this looks like deliberate misinterpretation of old statements, like the intentional twisting by right-wing pundits in 2017 of an old tweet by MSNBC correspondent Sam Cedar, a furor that led to Cedar being fired and then rehired, which also reminds me of James Gunn.
Oh, yeah.
Who was fired off of Guardians 3 early on and then rehired back because they had dug back into tweets that were, 10 years old?
At least, yeah.
And they didn't like what he had said. Now, he eventually gets hired back. And it's strange, too, because the people that were upset with him seemed to be his allies.
Yeah, and, he definitely discussed that he had grown and matured since tweeting those, and even the the dialogue that we had 10 years ago drastically changed, where what was acceptable, not acceptable anymore. And he said, like, I don't speak like that anymore. Like, I change with the times.
But what he got was very rare. He got a chance to explain himself and eventually back into people's good graces, which grace, forgiveness, that's kind of what we're talking about. That doesn't happen very much anymore. She goes on to say, sometimes it can take the shape of a broad fan-led cultural conversation, like the backlash over the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot before it's released, which you will remember that one was the reboot that had the all-female cast.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was thinking about that and like, yeah, there was a lot of people upset about that before the movie came out because they're placing it in political terms when really they were just trying to make a movie and they just thought, what if they were all women? Now, they were all funny women too. Like, a lot of people said that movie was review bombed or whatever because people didn't like it because they called it quote unquote woke. I would say you just wasted 4 very talented, funny women and by not writing a good enough script because it wasn't very funny.
Yeah, it was a little rough.
But she specifically talks about that. I guess, what are the psychological effects of living in this culture? It seems like kind of a cycle to me. Are we doomed to just keep going this direction? Or like what are the effects happening to us right now?
I think it definitely is going to spread anxiety and fear. I mean, within the society that you're living in. When you don't feel like you can be forgiven, if you don't feel like you can receive someone's grace, you're going to be very reluctant to share and open up with people, which in turn is going to prevent meaningful connections. As you know, and I think most people know, psychological health is tied to your support, and you have your family as a pillar. Think of it like pillars of support, right? You've got your family support, friendship support. You've got the church, you've got hobbies and interests, and the fewer supports you have, the more vulnerable you are to an unstable structure, and it's a problem.
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%. If you are not connected, it is to your detriment. And with this culture putting us in a state of fear, anxiety, and anger, you don't want to let people into your vulnerable bubble. And if you stay recluse enough, there's also a strong probability that you're going to be depressed. You're not going to be motivated to do much. You might not be able to keep or maintain a job. I mean, there's a lot of things that can spiral just from having this existential dread of the culture weighing over you.
And COVID didn't help that either. Because you mentioned recluse. I mean, all the data would suggest right now that most people don't have the same amount of close friends they had 30, 40 years ago. COVID made people, if you were already someone who was like agoraphobic, not someone that wanted to go outside a lot, you definitely don't want to go outside now because COVID isn't exactly an afterthought. It's still out there and around. And now you're adding bird flu and whatever else the media wants to try and scare us with and report on 24/7. Like, I see more Ebola articles now than I did when Ebola was actually more of a concern, I think, So, go ahead.
Yeah. So we create this world, this culture where, no one's forgiving anyone, right? So we grow up, and when we do apologize to people, it's like not good enough, right? They turn their nose up, or they say, no, we're just going to have to see things differently, and we go the other way. And what that does is it kind of teaches that young person, the world is an unforgiving place and it doesn't work. So, and what we need to learn is that people can forgive and that we can learn to have disagreements and still care about each other, right? And we need to develop resiliency. And I'm afraid that in our society today, that's something that's really missing, and why we're not learning that piece is critical to becoming a resilient individual.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting given the next part of this. So we're describing a world and a culture and a society that's having a hard time forgiving. And the cycle of it all seems to be taking us farther down that road where you just said, now people like think, what's the point of even apologizing? So I'm not going to be forgiven. So I'm not going to give you, if I give you an apology, it's going to be half-hearted or not genuine.
Right.
And I'm not going to really mean it. And we're going further and further down this road. And we literally, the villains we create, I think that's the thing that steps out of my mind. And politics is a great place for me to put it into to words because, again, I'm very neutral when it comes to politics. I don't really care all that much because to me, they're all kind of the same. And the funny thing I see both sides doing is they really vilify these political figures, like make them worse than they actually are in a lot of ways. Like where I would say most politicians are doing some work for the people they represent, but mostly they're just putting money in, they're making a living for themselves too. And that's the worst thing I can say is that, hey, they're a lot like the people we run around out and about. Like I'm just living my life. I'm trying to do my thing. But we make it so much so that it's worse. And we only have two parties, really big parties in this country. And it gets more extreme and the attacking gets worse. And not only are you making each other villains, but those villains cannot be redeemed in your mind. Now, let's go to pop culture, where in the last 30 years, you have something very interesting happen, especially like we can talk about just superhero movies. So this comes from an article in hyperallergic.com, and the writer is Dan Schindel. He wrote this back in 2019. And he said this: characters like Vulture from Spider-Man Homecoming speaking out about class inequality, Black Panther's Eric Killmonger decrying the worldwide oppression of black people while Wakanda was hiding itself away from the world, this super technologically advanced race of Africans. Infinity War's Thanos being driven by fears of universal overpopulation. These villains pose a threat to the status quo, and their motivations for doing so are understandable or even inarguable. But superheroes traditionally exist to protect the status quo. And when such fictional battles drag in real-world problems where the status quo absolutely needs upending, it makes for an odd dissonance. I think you can see this dissonance in the fictional world, the world of our pop culture, and the real world. And the interesting thing that I see is I think you're seeing villains who are highly designed to be for you to feel empathy for. The Joker's a great example in The Dark Knight. And this is just on the beginning edge of it, maybe just outside the beginning edge of it. The Joker was just a psychopath in the old comics. There was no rhyme or reason to it. But even in Chris Nolan's movie, The Dark Knight, it's clear he's a victim at some point in his life of abuse. He tells lots of stories. He's an unreliable narrator. But clearly you're meant to believe this guy has suffered at some point. Fast forward to Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, where all that conjecture turns into real. This is a victim of abuse.
Yep.
And so I guess what I want to know is in a time where we seem to have less grace to give than ever, why are we writing villains that seem designed to create empathy? Is this like, do we kind of inherently know this and this is like wish fulfillment?
I think so. If we step back a little bit and we think about just film in general, film is the most popular art form in today's world, right? And before that, it was theater, and before that, it was painting, and before that, it was storytelling, right? I mean, so this is our art form of the day. And if we accept the assumption that this film is kind of a representation, a symbolic representation of the psyche of today, then I think it is a little bit of that wish fulfillment of an unmet need, so to speak, of how I think we'd like to take a little bit more time to understand why someone is the way they are, why a villain went bad.
Mm.
So I think that could be part of it. I also wonder if part of it is just the way that we used to portray heroes and villains. Like a lot of heroes, especially if you go 60s and beyond, further back, they were just pure good. There was no flaws whatsoever.
Yeah, like Superman.
Yeah, like Superman. And then the villains were paper thin and just evil. They were just the worst.
Cloaked in black, twisting mustache. Yeah.
All that. And so what we do see now a lot more of is that the heroes have flaws. And you might even hate the heroes at times, especially if you're watching the Snyderverse. But the villains usually have a reason for why they're doing it or why they are the way they are. And so I knew we were kind of going to get here, and it brought back a weird memory. So when I first joined my church when I was a teenager, I was in middle school, the youth director told a story from like a 1998 Nick News snippet by Linda Ellerby. I don't know.
Nick News, like Nickelodeon?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember Linda Ellerby, but
No.
So serious journalist, but she would do a Nickelodeon news thing.
Oh, okay.
But she talked about how kids were cheating on their test in 1998. And the number one excuse they gave was, we saw Bill Clinton cheat on his spouse.
No.
And that this is why we felt we could do it. Now, I was a cynical back then, evidently, as well as I am today, and was like, no, that's just an excuse they're giving. They wanted to justify being able to cheat. They wanted to get a good score on their test.
Cody, I don't know if you're familiar with kids, but they don't usually think about politicians either.
Yeah.
I don't think they're just saying it. You think they were just saying it?
I think that they're like, oh, well, we heard cheat in the news. I just got caught cheating. Okay, chalk it up. But I do think that there is a generation, Gen X and older millennials, that kind of grew up with not everything's perfect. It's a little jaded. And so, like, our villains, they're going to be a little bit more relatable. And our heroes, they're not going to be the ultra perfect person, because that doesn't exist.
Yeah. That's interesting because I think I hadn't really thought about the hero part of that, but the counterparts of Superman in the MCU and Marvel would be Captain America. But they did a story like this where they kind of blurred the lines of all that, and Captain America comes off as, by his critics, being naive, which Superman would get that sort of too. But in the movie I'm thinking of, it's Captain America's Civil War, where the good guys are all fighting among themselves on how best to settle in with the government after a mission goes awry, where people get hurt and people die. And so Captain America has to go kind of, well, off the beaten path.
Rogue agent.
Which is very un-Captain America. It's very un-Steve Rogers. But I guess where I want to go with this now is, does portraying villains with understandable motives and heroes with flaws, does this blur the lines between good and evil? And is that actually a good thing? Why or why not?
Okay. I'm going to give you the classic therapist response here. It depends on your perspective. In my mind, that you're speaking to the therapist soul when you talk about, hey, we're going to generate and create empathy for people that we perceive as villains, and to better understand someone and maybe take some time to walk in their shoes and get a better understanding of why people do what they do and choose the actions that they do. Like, that's a really good thing. I wish more people had empathy and love and understanding and patience for each other. The flip side of that coin, in my mind, is we are blurring the lines between good and evil, and it can kind of glamorize, kind of like Cody was alluding to earlier, and it can make some of the decisions that these bad guys are making seem more appealing. And when we look at the Bible, and it's pretty clear with the commandments, for example, thou shalt not kill. It doesn't say thou shalt not kill, but if you had, a rough upbringing, then, we're going to have some lean, you know what I mean? There isn't that extra context. So it kind of blurs, it brings ambiguity to good and evil, right?
Yeah.
So it depends on your perspective.
Yeah.
I will say right now, I'm wearing a Loki shirt and John Cena pants. I am ultimate heel villain mode right now. And I do agree. It really depends on your perspective. Like, in my pastor mode, I would want them to have all the empathy for the villains of the world. Because I think as church people, that sometimes that is a huge stumbling block that, well, we expect you to be righteous before you enter the door. How dare you? But then I do think that there's a group of individuals that see this thing that's clearly not good, but you can relate to it. And so, yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
And it becomes something that we lift up and elevate to like an idol status.
So in the comic book stories alone, we go from characters who are just sparkling good and terribly evil, and they're very one-dimensional. Superman versus the villain, right? Joker with Batman, and we're moving to this place where, that makes sense because it's mythology. It was modern day mythology where they're not really superheroes; they're gods. And I think, if you're asking me personally, and I mean gods lowercase g, so I don't offend anybody, but if you're asking me, I appreciate that the superhero stories we're telling, they're starting to resemble real humans. It's humanity. Yeah. They're extra powered humans. And if you're going to tell stories about humans, here's what I believe, and this is this came about because of my religion and my spirituality, but my brain thinks this too now. It's not just my heart. There are no good and evil people. There's only levels of brokenness. All humans are worthy of being loved, all humans are valuable. All humans are this. And if I believe that, and that's where, lots of people who aren't religious believe that. If we believe that humans are valuable, then we have to believe that they're not good and evil. They're just broken. And I think once we get there, once you can get your thinking there, and I appreciate that pop culture is kind of doing that, then we can invite empathy into the conversation. All of a sudden, I don't have to hate my neighbor who's flying a Trump flag, right? I can say, if you want to think he's deceived or whatever, you can invite empathy into it and treat him like a human being, or vice versa if you're of the other political persuasion. And so I guess I think you can see that. I never thought, I did think so. I thought comic books when I was growing up, were incredible stories, because this is not unheard of in comic books. Magneto was a child of the Holocaust. He gets separated from his parents. His parents die in the Holocaust because he's Jewish. And that was always a part of his story. And it informs everything he does after it. The hatred he forms for humans who consider themselves normal, and he's different. Thanos. We had a whole subculture around the Infinity War and Endgame movies that was like hashtag Thanos was right. And honestly, if you just look at the blueprint and say, what's the cause of the problem? I can't prove you wrong if you just say, well, there's just too many people. We're ruining the planet. Some people believe that. I don't know that I can argue against that. I think killing off half the population of everything is where Thanos becomes a real villain. But at least we understand we're creating villains where we understand the turn to the evil deed. But I think where to bring this back to the beginning, how it's like in the real world, aren't we creating Thanoses? Aren't we creating Magnetos with this very unforgiving world we've created? Every time there's a mass shooting, we spend days arguing about what the cause is. And we never point the finger at ourselves. We never look at ourselves and wonder, how am I culpable in this? How am I culpable in this? Because if we did, I think we would find that creating a culture without grace gives boldness to people who are broken and cannot control their actions. It makes them bolder. And you wonder why we seem to be funneling into this more extreme forms of violence and everything. What's wrong with America? I'll tell you what's wrong with America. We are unable to give grace, and it creates a spiraling culture of emboldened, broken people. Be like, well, if I'm not going to get grace from the other side, from the people who think like me, then something's got to give. And so I think that's where we're at. And I think the stories we're telling are actually trying to tell us that we're heading the wrong direction. I don't know. What separates, in your mind, the sympathetic villains we're creating and the villains on the big stage now, which are most all political, like in the real world? We've created real villains out of politicians, for the most part in this country. What is separating that?
I think primarily, you have to take it case by case basis, but I think it's primarily we have to look at the motivation. What is the motivation behind it? When we're thinking about Thanos, what he's trying to do, right? Mm-hmm. He's trying to solve a crisis, right? Is that the best way to go about it? Probably not. And I remember in that article he talks about maybe the true issue and for Thanos was overconsumption. Right? Yeah. And it's like, but we don't want to, that makes the audience a little uncomfortable. That might hold us a little too accountable. I don't know how well that would do at the box office. Right. But I think it boils down to motivation. What is the primary motivation behind the villain?
Yeah.
And that's something that we don't judge well, I feel. Humanity as a whole and throughout the eons, that we can't really judge the motivation or character super well unless someone's just super transparent. Unless you have someone that is almost mustache twirling level of evil, or someone that is very Christ-like, like Mother Teresa. Yeah. Otherwise, it's blurred lines everywhere.
But doesn't that make the stories we're currently telling more amazing? It's easy for me to understand. We can all look at a Western movie from the 60s and 70s and say, oh, that's whack. That is completely ridiculous, where you either have Native Americans being the bad guys. It's like cowboys and Indians, right? Where one side's the good guys, one guy's the bad guy. We can all look at that and say, whatever. But most of the time in human history, that's the way our stories have been. Maybe because of what Cody said, because we have a hard time judging good and evil. But what if we don't have a hard time doing it? What if it's inherently we know that's not a real dividing line? That humans, again, are all valuable, and that humans do bad things, and it all comes from a level of brokenness. If I don't think there's good and bad people, then I have to come up with another reason when someone does something that hurts other humans. And that other reason is, well, we already have a saying for it. Hurt people hurt people. That's the cycle. That's what we do. And that doesn't mean we don't have punishments and, consequences. But it does mean, forgiveness isn't for the people, others. It's for you. We live in the most luxurious, comfortable civilizations of humans that have ever graced this planet. Like, we're literally the richest people, the most comfortable people that have ever lived. And we're super sad. The data out there backs that up. We are unhappy people. And I think it is tied to this issue, this idea that we're just angry at everybody. We can't forgive. We can't give grace. And we can't figure out that it's not giving them anything. It's giving us something. Freedom. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'll let you take it anywhere you want to go. I've kind of manipulated into these corners. Is there anywhere you want to go in this discussion?
Well, like the 13-year-old Cody once thought with the Bill Clinton thing, that people are just looking for ways to justify their own actions. And I think some of that trickles into why we hold people down, why we try to label one group of people the worst that's walking around this planet, even if they do several great things. We just want to justify ourselves and our well-being, and it's a very temporary, fleeting thing. Because once I say I'm better than you, Dave, at 90s country music trivia,
that's true.
The bragging point, it's temporary, and it leaves me just okay, what's next? It's an emptiness, and that leads into that sadness, that depression. And when we don't have the relationship that we used to have, because I said I'm better than you at 90s country music, I've lost a support. And so I don't have anyone to talk to about my emptiness now, because I've already shoved you off and said you're the worst of the worst and I'm the best of the best.
Yeah. Andrew, yes. I think I have a final question here that we can go through here that may give us some insight into what we think in this issue. And we're going to come at it from a pop culture angle. Okay. Who's your favorite villain of any story? Who's your favorite villain?
That's such a tough question.
Yeah.
The first one that popped in my head was Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Love Darth Vader.
Okay. Now tell me why.
When I was younger, it was because he had an awesome lightsaber, and he was, dressed in black, and he just looked awesome.
He's got a kick butt look.
Right.
Yeah.
He's got a good look.
And he talks with a deep voice.
Yeah. So that was probably my childhood, favorite villain. I don't know. When I think villain, my mind goes to Darth Vader.
Yeah. But does Return of the Jedi, when you find out who he is, does it make it better or worse? Is he more interesting or less interesting?
I to be honest, I was a little disappointed when you take the helmet off and you see, and you're like, oh, this guy looks like Humpty Dumpty. I was pretty bummed out when I saw, it just didn't look.
Well,
that's not James Earl Jones.
I can see that from a kid's point of view.
That guy's
for real.
face doesn't match that awesome voice.
Yeah.
No, as I got older, I think the more fascinating, morally ambiguous characters were probably more interesting to me. Hannibal Lecter, would probably be one of my. I know he's bad, but he's helping Clarice. I don't know. I found that interesting. So one of those guys probably.
So I would lean the Joker, any iteration of the Joker, really, and then wrestling.
Oh, he's going wrestling.
I'll go wrestling. I'll go the Fiend, Bray Wyatt.
Okay.
Because at times, very much seemed like, oh, he's a face. But then it's like, there's this dark side. And then he is definitely a heel. And he is going to bring you back to your core. And there was some life-changing events for anyone that he wrestled. So there was something going on that it was like, oh, this is deeper. And with wrestling, what we've talked about, our heels have become more well thought out. Before, the Iron Sheik, oh, he's not American, we hate him. Or Andre the Giant, he's just tall and mean. Go Hulk Hogan, he says his prayers and eats his vitamins. But even wrestling has become more like, okay, this person's relatable and this person's not necessarily as good as we thought they might have been.
Yeah. So I've got two villains that stand out in my head, and they're both comic book villains because I loved comic books growing up, and they always appealed to me, and for kind of pretty much the same reasons. One of them is Lex Luthor, and it seemed like every iteration of Lex made him more human, and especially once you get to Smallville, which takes a lot of liberties with, obviously, the canon. But I thought that made him the most interesting he's ever been, where it takes his insecurities, his he feels unloved by his father, like he's got daddy issues, and he's pitted in like against Superman, who's adored by his adoptive parents. Like, not only did this guy have parents who sent him away from his planet as it was dying, their last act was to save his life. He lands in the field of parents who are adopted and love them as their own. Why wouldn't that piss you off if you were Lex Luthor? And he's got powers that he just gets because he's from our sun? Like, he's super understandable. It makes all the sense in the world. And I just identified with that. But even more so, I identified with the guy Cody's wearing on his shirt.
Yeah.
Loki.
That was almost my answer.
I loved Thor comics when I was growing up, more than Superman comics. I love Marvel in general, but Thor comics were one of my favorites. And the ambiguousness of Loki's villainy was one of my favorite aspects of that. Thor went up against real villains, like that were just villains for being villain's sake. But Loki was different. When you had a Loki story, it was always coming from the same motivation. Somebody please love me. Someone please notice me. Notice I'm here. See me. Like, he's the adopted kid who doesn't get the Kents, right? He gets Odin, who loves Thor. And why wouldn't you? It's Chris Hemsworth, man. The flowing blonde locks. He's buff. He's handsome. He talks like this. He's got like the voice. He's got the total package. And then there's Loki, he's runt. He's not even a member of that godly family.
He's not Asgardian.
He's a frost giant, right?
Ew.
Who they look down on. And yet he's afforded some of the trappings of royalty without being fully invited in. And I love villains like that. And I always have. And I think I've come to learn that I think I've always had a minister's heart, where I have always had immense empathy. One time, this is a story I don't think I've ever told on the podcast. My dad was an auto racer. I don't know if have I ever mentioned this before?
Maybe not on the pod, but
okay. So my dad raced stock cars around the Midwest, and I would like kind of follow him around. I didn't live with my dad, but I'd go visit him on weekends occasionally, and he would go off to these races, and he was in this series that raced kind of all across the Midwest. It wasn't NASCAR, or it was NASCAR, but it wasn't the Winston Cup. I don't know what it's called now. It wasn't the top thing. It was like a few flights down, like the minors in baseball. And he had an arch rival. This is hilarious. For those of you who have no knowledge of like stock car racing, it's not unlike any other professional sport. You have rivals.
Earnhardt and Gordon.
Right. And in this case, it was just my dad and this other driver who'd like had some battles, and where in stock car racing, it usually meant they traded paint.
Okay.
That's racing terminology. Where they got into each other, and maybe, this guy spun out my dad once. And so like my dad and his pit crew, they didn't like these guys. There's pit fights all the time in racing, by the way. I don't know how many people know that either, but growing up, I saw a lot of them. Anyways, we're at this race in Bolivar, Missouri.
Oh, it's been there.
It's super hot. So it's a long race. These cars are like 100 plus degrees. They're wearing like fire retardant outfits. So they're super like keeping them hydrated when they come into the pits and keeping them as cool as possible is of the utmost importance. And so this is a hot day. We've got the Gatorade ready. I'm like 13 years old and I'm in the pits for the first time. And I'm feeling this place. I'm like, oh man, I get to help. I'm on the team. And my job is to get the Gatorade ready for my dad when he comes in. Now, pitted right next to us is my dad's arch rival. The race is getting close to the end. The arch rival comes in the pits unexpectedly. We can see his crew kind of scrambling. They're like yelling into their headphones, the microphones, and it seems like they're having a hard time communicating with him. Well, at this time, the race is ending as he's pulling into the pits, and the pit crew guys say, "Hey, go get him the Gatorade." At this time, right when the arch rival is coming in and he's having a heat stroke. Like he's trying to get out of the car and he's like doing this. So when the pit crew, who's not even paying attention to the arch rival, tells me, "Hey, go get the Gatorade." I go get a Gatorade and I take it to the arch rival as a 13-year-old kid. Now, when I get back to the crew's looking at me funny. They're like, these are adult men. And they're like, what the H did you do that for? Yeah. And I felt really bad. I felt ashamed. But in that moment, it was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. This guy's having a heat stroke. I'm going to take him some Gatorade.
Yeah, that was the human response. You did the right thing.
And I tell that to say that, like, that's the way my heart's always been tuned. And I want to say, I think maybe that's the way all of our hearts get tuned. That's what we're tuned to. I want to believe that. We just get broken. It gets beaten out of us. And I have to believe that if we could take a step outside of ourselves and see this in action and be able to see people not as good and bad, but as just broken. We're all different levels of broken. Maybe we'd be this way towards each other. It's like, I don't have to have rivalries with people anymore. I don't have to feel like I'm opposed to anybody. That's where, for the first time in my life, I don't feel opposed to anybody. I don't have enemies. And maybe not being involved in politics is a big part of that. Like when I say I don't care about politics, I do not care. I don't follow it. I vote usually for the independent because I don't have a strong enough opinion either way. But like, I don't care. And it's the best thing I've ever done for myself, for my own mental health.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys think? You got any closing statements?
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. I don't know. I'm just, I guess one thing that's coming to mind for me is just this idea that, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. You want to go ahead, Cody? I'm sorry.
So for me, I definitely feel that it's not finite that we're stuck in this cycle or that we're going to be permanently stuck here, but something does have to change. Whether it's the rhetoric within our political sphere, whether it's the way we engage in social media, a combination of that, whether it's what we promote at schools for the younger generations, or even the way that we organize our business structures. Because growing up, it was a dog-eat-dog world as you're making your way up the hierarchy at work. And, like, there's no need for that in most career paths. And, like, you can make friends along the way.
Yeah. But even in that world, something from my childhood that I've never forgotten is it was generally a standard rule that we respected our elders. That was just a thing. Even if our elders had really done nothing to really engage that respect. I worked in the high school here a few years back, and what I was struck by the most was that sort of feeling was not among today's teenagers. They were almost all to a person were like, no. The teacher has to earn my respect. They have to earn my respect. And I'm not here to say whether I think I had an opinion in the moment, I think in fact, I think of what I told the kids that told me that was, well, they did earn your respect by virtue of living on the earth longer. They may know something, that you don't. Yeah. But now, given distance, I'm not necessarily here to say it's right or wrong. It's just different. But I think it's tied to all this idea that we're much more isolated, it seems. It's like we're not in this together is the general feeling, when I couldn't disagree with that statement more. No. We're all connected. Whether you think there's a creator, not a creator, whether you think we evolved, whether you think this is all just happenstance, you cannot deny that we're connected. Pretty much all science will back that up, by the way. Like, do you know when you sing together, your heartbeats synchronize? Like, there are things that we can't explain that pretty clearly would suggest we're connected in a way that we can't really understand.
Right.
And if that's true, then we need to figure something out. All right.
Did you think of your last thought?
I did, but we kind of missed the moment. But it was just about, I was thinking about like fairy tales. When we're kids, we hear these stories, that teach us about good versus evil and the dichotomy, right? Mm-hmm. But then as we get older, we realize that the world really isn't black and white. It's not just good and evil. There's moral shades of gray, and it just gets more complex. And I think we use those simple terms with children, but then some children just kind of carry that black and white. You know what I mean? That thinking of, all or nothing thinking into adulthood but that's the moment pass.
That's really interesting. We teach our kids that because we're scared. We know there's people in the world that would take advantage of them, and children are trusting.
They are. Yeah.
They have no reason not to trust people.
Right. And that's what triggered it, because you gave that man, that rival, that Gatorade, and because you knew that was right. So that's what triggered that.
I don't know why you're bringing up old stuff. You're trying to twist the knife?
And then Cody went off on a completely different tangent.
Just trying to keep up. Yeah.
But it's really interesting that maybe it is something that we teach our children, and it's very innocent. We do it out of love and a fear for them, to protect them.
Right.
But maybe that's not what we should be teaching them, because I mean, look in the Bible, and no one else has any reason to believe this. Fear not, where Cody and I are at as people in ministry. But the main center of our faith actually tells people, like, hey, you can't see this unless you come to it like a kid. Like, you won't be able to understand this unless you come like a child, which is very much with that innocence and to me, that's always said, this belief that people are inherently not evil.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they refer to that in the literature as the wisdom of the child, right? And it's that you're naive, but you're also open to those experiences, and you see the world from a fresh perspective.
Yeah. So. All right. Tell us what you think about this discussion. A little something different. We just had Andrew on the show, and we thought, well, we can't waste the knowledge base here,
the clinical perspective.
So we wanted to dig into something deeper that was real world, but also pop culture. And so tell us what you think. What villains resonate with you? Did you notice this about our villains of the day? And lastly, if you're listening to this and you think this hit a nerve with you, I think what I want to leave you with is just to say, I don't really care what you've done, what mistakes you've made, how you're living currently. I love you. You're worthy of being loved. You are valuable as a human being, as a brother in humanity or a sister in humanity. And I just want to tell you that I'm for you. I want you to win at life. I want you to be happy. I want you to be joyful. And that's just it.
Ditto.
Amen.
Well said, Cody. Well said. We'll see you next time.